I feel like we're forgetting about Jordyn Bailey on what should be his chance for a breakout season.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Thanks for making Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. We're going to get to women's basketball in segment 2, also men's basketball. The men fighting for their postseason life. The ladies are going to play for a league championship on Sunday evening against Baylor. But we start today with the wide receiver room, which is something we talked about a lot. TCU is replacing their entire wide receiver production group. Savion Williams, gone to the NFL. Jack Besh, head to the NFL. JP Richardson, same story. So they brought in Joseph Manjack from Houston. They're also bringing in Jordan Dwyer from Idaho. Eric McAllister is going to be the premier wide receiver one on the outside. Had a big year last year, a lot of explosive plays. And Ed Small is a true freshman that people are very excited about. His name keeps coming up when we talk about players who could play immediately. But one guy that I feel like we're forgetting about through the shuffle and just the discussion around what this offense could be next season is Jordyn Bailey. And Jordyn Bailey adds a dimension to this offense that they really didn't have last season. JP Richardson was their guy in the slot, and he was as consistent as anyone. I feel like as much as you can't deny, TCU is going to miss Savion Williams and Jack Besh. They're going to miss those guys immensely. But they're also going to miss JP Richardson, just his consistency, his ability to move the chains, what he did on a week-to-week basis. However, one interesting aspect of Jordyn Bailey's game, you saw it against Oklahoma State when he took that jet sweep pop pass, 59 yards for a touchdown. He has a home run quality that, as great as JP Richardson was as a wide receiver, he really didn't bring that to the table. Now, he could break off a big run from time to time, but he wasn't somebody you were going to use a lot in those kind of gadgety situations. And TCU has had a long history, whether it was Darius Davis, Kavonte Turpin. Jalen Rager's not really a perfect person to put in this group because he was more of your prototypical outside wide receiver. He just happened to be such a versatile player that you could move him around. Of course, Savion Williams was the guy on the Wildcat, but he's not built like some of these other players that I'm listing. But they've had a long history of being kind of like slot wide receiver you, or having guys that are smaller, shiftier, but that have that ability to bring a home run threat to the offense, take the top off the defense, even though it's not in the traditional run a vertical, run a post, those deep throws in the vertical passing game. And towards the end of the season, we saw Bailey do that. He also, I think, will be the leader in the clubhouse to be your punt returner. And as awesome as JP Richardson was at that, the reason he was back there was because he was going to catch the ball consistently, which is, I mean, that's job number one. That's priority number one when we're talking about fielding punts, making sure the offense gets the ball. He also housed one against Kansas, which was a big play and a big moment in that ball game. But I think there's a lot of different ways that Kendall Briles can use Jordyn Bailey that will make him effective in this offense. One thing that they did really well last year to supplement their lack of run game was they got creative in the short passing game. All those throws behind the line of scrimmage. It wasn't just, all right, this corner's playing off. Let's lob it out there to our outside wide receiver and let him get 5 or 6 yards. They would motion JP Richardson across the formation, have some blockers set up, almost give him kind of a running head start, wing it out to him there on the edge and let him go to work. The screen game was an area where they excelled. And again, just Bailey's ability to get to the outside and use his speed and athleticism to make plays could potentially add something to this offense that they didn't really have at times last season as good as they were. So it's exciting to see that. And it's really hard to overstate, I'm not sure we'll fully know what it's going to look like until the season starts. Just how much they're losing at wideout. Like, I'm not hitting the panic button or anything. I'm excited about the team they have and the skill players they have, but they were so good at that position group last year that it made up for the fact that they couldn't really run the ball consistently. It made Josh Hoover look like an elite quarterback at times. And now he's got to find that same chemistry with a new group of players. We also saw Jordyn. I mean, it was small sample size, but that one-handed catch in the end zone against Baylor was ridiculous. And he'll have opportunities to get in there and make plays. He sort of brings a different pace and dimension to what they're doing than a guy like Joseph Manjack, who is, again, kind of a possession wide receiver, dude who's out there moving the chains, making plays. You need that. Kamorian Pimpton at tight end is a fun name to know. We'll see if TCU puts him on the end of the line of scrimmage or if they split him out wide in the slot more. But at LSU, he made some plays. When he was at North Crowley, his highlight tape's ridiculous. They basically used him like a wide receiver. So having options and avenues in the middle of the field is an exciting prospect. And I don't think, like, last year they got away from using Dabney, but I believe it was honestly just the fact that they were so good at the wide receiver spots. You didn't really have the need to use your tight end. Also, I mean, just to be honest about it, Drake Dabney was not as good as Jared Wiley. Jared Wiley was a guy who could go catch the football and make plays and make things happen. But one thing that Sonny Dykes mentioned at the beginning of spring ball last year, he singled out Jordyn Bailey and Major Everhart, and he said, look, these are two guys that you can just tell the jump from year one to year two is pretty ridiculous. Like, we saw them, they understand the offense better. They just have a better feel for playing college football, what we need them to do, what their responsibilities are. And they honestly looked like completely different players. Those were his words, not mine. And so those became two guys that I was really excited about. And as the season progressed, didn't really see either of them outside of what they did in the kick return game. But sometimes I think it just takes a year. It just takes a season. Maybe it's not, the season you think, it's the next season where we see the fruits of the labor on the field. And also, the bottom line is, as much as I know they like to rotate wideouts, their starters were so good last year, it was hard to take those guys off the field. So it's difficult to justify getting reps to other players. I do think this is going to be a pretty critical year for both Bailey and Everhart, and is going to determine which one sticks around for the long haul. And honestly, you might see that after spring ball, just because, I mean, they're very similar players and there's only so many snaps to go around. So if you're not getting those reps and those opportunities at a certain point, you have to kind of assess your situation and say, okay, maybe this is just not in the cards for me. But I'm super excited about what Bailey can potentially bring to the table. And I just feel like he's one of those guys that we're losing sight of in all the excitement of the year. And we sort of, as fans and as media people, sometimes we gravitate towards the new faces because it's just more fun to talk about the unknown. It's more intriguing to discuss, okay, what does this guy do? I don't really know. So I can sort of, even if it's not totally true, it's easier to imagine that this person that I haven't seen play in a TCU uniform has a higher ceiling than someone who's been around for a few years, just because I kind of have a feel for what these guys that have played or that have been on the roster, what they're about, what the coaching staff's plan is for them. And true freshmen or transfers, it's just nice to kind of imagine and speculate on what they can do. But I think Bailey's a guy who is ready to step in and make this happen. And this has been kind of brewing now for a few years. You saw towards the end of the season against Baylor, against Oklahoma State, against Arizona, an effort to get him the ball more. And I think a lot of that was, okay, this is a dude that we're going to count on next year to take snaps and make plays. So we need to make sure he's ready. The only way we're going to make sure he's ready is by giving him opportunities in the passing game. And I've talked at length this offseason about how they have to find a way to improve this running game. There's a lot of different ways that they can go about that and do that. And this is another aspect of it that can make them a more balanced offense. The quick passing game, the jet sweep game, having someone who can take those plays where really it's like, all right, 1st and 10, we're trying to get 5 or 6 yards to make it a more manageable 2nd down and potentially 3rd down. But Bailey is a guy that can shatter those expectations because he can take the ball to the house with his speed. When we come back, TCU women's basketball playing for a league title on Sunday. Can they get it done against Baylor? We'll talk about it here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Listen, I have 4 kids, and last summer, one thing I started thinking about more seriously is, man, my job, it doesn't offer great life insurance, or it just doesn't cover a lot of life insurance. And I would be so devastated if something happened and I didn't feel like my family was adequately covered, or I couldn't have that peace of mind of knowing if the tragic thing did happen, or my wife and my children can be okay. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps. Before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get them term life insurance that fits your family's needs. It gives you that peace of mind. They have affordable coverage, and they also have digital wills and access to investments that can help plan your child's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Fabric, go to meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege to check out their plans today. One note I wanted to pass along before we started talking hoops. Savion Williams, Mel Kiper Jr. was doing kind of a roundtable discussion with some other ESPN personalities on this ESPN Plus article yesterday. And one of the questions that they asked was, who is the guy that's going to stand out and make some waves in the combine? And he mentioned his name was Savion Williams. That's who he said. And he was like, look, this is a guy that at TCU, they moved him all around the formation, but he's a force and he's someone that can make plays, and that they're excited about his potential going into the combine. And I said this earlier this week. I was like, listen, Savion is a dude who can make his money at the combine. Jack Besh has already asserted himself as a big time prospect with what he did at the Senior Bowl, being MVP of the Senior Bowl, being a guy that made plays in the practices. He's shown what he can do. So really the combine for him is simply reaffirming those qualities and basically just like proving I'm an athletic force. My testing numbers are adequate when we're talking about being an NFL wide receiver. And I'm just showing everybody that I can also do this. For Savion, this is the chance to show that he's got a much higher ceiling as a player, just because he can do things athletically that even when we're talking about being amongst the best athletes in the country, it's going to stand out. And well, that's not the end all be all. It's going to show his versatility in all the different possibilities that a team can have with him on their roster. And that's what's going to win out for Savion when we're talking about his ability as a prospect moving forward. So super excited to see what he can do when he hits the combine testing room. And that's going to be on Saturday. That's when the quarterbacks and wide receivers go through their tests. So running that 40 time, doing those cone drills And then all the drills where, you're running across the formation, catching passes, showing what you can do once you get the ball in your hands. Savion, I think, is going to excel at that, and it's going to be fun to watch. TCU women's basketball. They take down Houston 91-56 on Wednesday night. They are now 15-2 in conference play. And they will take on Baylor, who is also 15-2 in conference play on Sunday at 5:30. Winner will be the outright Big 12 champion. Haley Van Lith was really good in this Houston game. She had 26 points, 20 points in the first half, hit some threes, had a nasty crossover at the top of the key in the first half where she went to her left hand, got back to her right hand, finished around the rim, just looked very in control. All the seniors were locked in. Like Sedona Prince had a good day. Madison Connor, Agnes Napu was fantastic. Everybody played at a high level. They got the bench emptied out late in the ball game, gave those seniors a standing ovation. It was pretty wild to see, like, you knew this, but at one point I was like, man, he's really going to have to replace this entire roster next year. Like, they are so senior heavy. That's going to be a real job. And I mean, he's done it in the transfer portal in the past. That's how he's built this roster. That's the way it's currently constructed. And he'll have Maddie Shear back from an injury. He'll have Donovan Hunter, Taylor Bigby. But you're losing so much. And really, I mean, you're losing your big three in Van Lith and Prince and Connor that have, driven the bus so much for you this season and what you've done. But Mark Campbell spoke for a long time in the post-game press conference, and I listened to that yesterday, and it was just intriguing. He was talking about it. He was kind of nostalgic and kind of reflective, I guess, with it just being senior night and all the emotions that come with that. But he discussed how the first off season, when they got Sedona Prince to commit, when they got Madison Connor to commit, he said, listen, we did that and we didn't really have any NIL money at the time. Like, we were just promising these people playing time. And he talked about how Madison Connor, when she got here, she was just a spot up shooter and she was averaging about 4 points a game at Arizona, but they believed in her and they saw what she could do. And they said, you know what? We think this is somebody who can come in and become a big time player. And they were right. I mean, she is turned into a player that can take people off the dribble and shoot in the mid range. And of course, what she does from beyond the arc is incredible, and the way she can help a team space the floor. And she'll be huge in this Baylor game, because one thing I've noticed going back to when they played Baylor last year in Waco and then this year at Fort Worth, Nikki Collin puts a huge emphasis on limiting her airspace, because even though Prince and Van Lith are so good, I think she sees Connor as kind of the X factor, that if her shooting is falling and she's on from beyond the arc, that TCU is such a dangerous team because of the way they can space the floor and the different options they have. And then he said, this offseason, obviously they go get Haley Van Lith and Donovan Hunter. And it was kind of, I mean, they had, I guess, more NIL resources, but they were also selling them. It was a risky proposition for those players because they were coming off a rough season. And so there wasn't much proof of concept. It was honestly like, hey, kind of taking a leap of faith here, I know, but we want you to be a part of this team. We want you to be a part of the rebuild of TCU women's basketball. And I think it was just a cool moment for him to kind of reflect on what they've done. And the job's not finished, but at the same time, it is amazing like how far they have grown and developed in the span of really one season from last year, which was so rough with all the injuries and with everything that went down. So TCU Baylor, 5:30 on Sunday, chance for this team to win a conference title. Men's basketball plays UCF on Saturday. And my main thought there is Noah Reynolds and Vashawn Allett have to be more aggressive. Noah Reynolds took one shot on Tuesday in Morgantown. Even if these shots aren't going to fall, like, these are the dudes that have to go make plays for TCU to be successful. It's just imperative that they do that. So if I'm Jamie Dixon, I'm telling those guys, listen, I know, shots weren't falling, but if we're going to be successful and we're going to be good, you guys are the key, because these are the players that can go get their own shot. These are the dudes that can make things happen. And so they need those guys to be successful this upcoming, these last 3 games, to win out and at least give themselves an opportunity to play in the postseason potentially. So UCF, TCU, and then the men will play Baylor after that, and one more game on the road against Colorado. Hopefully they can bounce back after 2 really rough performances. We'll come back and wrap things up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. PrizePicks. If you have always wondered about what it would be like to dip your toe in the daily fantasy waters, PrizePicks is the place to try. It's simply picking more or less on individual player projections. They have deals all the time. You can build lineups easily. It's fast. There's fast payouts. Download the app today and use promo code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Download the PrizePicks app, again, in the App Store or on Google Play. Pick more or less on some player projections. PrizePicks, they make it simple for you. Run your game today. Your first $5 lineup will get you $50 instantly. So yesterday I discussed Josh Hoover. There was a graphic on social media that said Josh Hoover is a top 20 paid player in college football, making potentially up to $2.5 million. And I threw it out there to the audience, and I was actually kind of surprised at your reactions. I was like, does that change your thought or your expectation about Josh? And most of you seem to kind of understand that this is just the world we live in. David May was like, I heard he got offered $3 million by Mizzou in the portal last offseason. So this is just the cost of doing business. My man Tommy Fisher was like, look, TCU would have only won 4 games last season if they didn't have Josh Hoover out there throwing the football. They need him. And that's a good perspective to have. I think sometimes we look at it like from a production standpoint of, okay, what did this guy do? How many yards did he throw for? That kind of thing. But honestly, it's almost kind of like insurance, because you have to assess your situation and say, okay, if this guy left tomorrow, like what would our team look like? What would we be doing? What would our plan be? And in Josh Hoover's case, he's got a lot of kind of power here because TCU doesn't have anyone behind him who's ready to step up and take the reins. And so you sort of have to pay out to maintain stability. And, it's like, that's the market price. That's what you're trying to protect and keep on your roster. So you need to do that. So I wasn't shocked, but I was a little pleasantly surprised at, I guess, how most people's perspectives seem to be, look, this is just the world that we're living in now. But I still believe that these players probably want these numbers to stay as hush hush as possible, because I do think like it adds a pressure that hasn't really been there in the past. Tommy also asked me if I thought Josh was making more than the entire men's basketball roster. I mean, I guess it's a possibility. I will say if the rumors about what Ernest Uday was making when he committed here are true, then I don't think that's the case. But even then, I feel like it would be pretty close. And yeah, I mean, football is what's driving the bus here. That's what's making the train go at a fast speed. Like that's what's kind of supplementing a lot of these other sports. And I think TCU is trying their best in basketball, but there's not as much excitement. There's not as much of commitment there. When we talk about NIL funds and just an ability to build a roster that's going to be really good in the Big 12 space. But in football, they're obviously making a big time commitment to Josh Hoover and others. And that's why there's a lot of expectations this upcoming season. I'll have more thoughts next week. I'll see you guys on Monday. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are also, don't forget, free and available wherever you get your podcast. It's your team every day.